It also shows that the in-demand skills are primarily technical skills. 68% of the organizations are focusing on technical skills, which also means that we are moving away from project managers being generalists, which used to be the case earlier. And I'm also one of the generalists. I don't specialize in any domain or core technology for that matter, but organizations are moving away from that particular uh, way of focus. They are looking at project managers also to be very technically skilled. That means you need to either have a business specialization in that particular business domain, or you need to have a specialization in the technical domain. That's why you see now, even when they ask for project managers in payments domain or project managers for .NET or Java, that's how they are looking at. So majority of the organizations are shifting from generalized project management focus to technical or domain based project management focus. Leadership skills, again, there is a big focus on leadership skills. Earlier it used to be management, now it is leadership. That means there is a shift in how you look at people, how you look at managing the teams or leading the teams, and focus is more on people. Of course, business skills are also high in demand. If you are a project manager who can bring in both the technical understanding and also the business understanding, then you are a perfect fit in today's world. And digital skills, of course, we all, especially with the onset of COVID, we are all thrown into a completely digitized world. So we need digital skills if we have to successfully deliver projects or even deliver outcomes for the organization. It also talks about three tenets are looking to adopt in today's world. Ability is agility. So that means however capable an organization is, if that is not agile in this world, then they are at a big loss. That means they are not able to adapt themselves to the dynamically and fast changing world. So the focus, even though you are very capable, you have to be equally agile. That means you need to be adaptable, you need to be flexible, you need to be accepting the change and be able to respond faster. So that is the first tenet that they talk about. And the second one, technology rules. Now we talk about this being a digital world, but even technology is driven by people. So most of the times we feel, okay, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, all these technologies have come. That means it might happen tomorrow that people may not be needed in, especially IT. That's one of the, I would say, dangers that we all look at when we are trying to implement artificial intelligence or machine learning in our deliverables or products. But people still play a part. Again, what we do, instead of doing monotonous work, we may be doing much more better work where our skills are utilized. And it also means that focus by organizations on technical skills is more driven from this aspect as well. So as we go forward, more and more monotonous or I would say repetitive work would be automated, and certain level of human intelligence also can be replaced by the machines. But still, people are the greater influence on the society as well as organizations. The third aspect is the project leadership. So how that is how we are moving away from project management as a concept to more towards project leadership. It's about leading the team, leading the people than managing them, which we will look into what that means in the future slides. Now, this is about what PMI feels as a pulse of the project management profession in today's world. And moving to the agile adoption, if you compare this in terms of how agile organizations are looking at, and if you look at how organizations are reacting, this is a survey conducted again this year by First Source. And this says the size of organizations that are adopting Agile are now becoming bigger and bigger, and also large organizations are also focusing on adopting Agile. So earlier there was a notion that possibly smaller organizations are better suited for Agile, and as organizations grow bigger and bigger, the complexities of those organizations are much higher, and the corporate dynamics are entirely different, and it is very difficult for them to adopt Agile. And with a lot of scaling models coming in, even PMI has come up with disciplined Agile. If you go and look at it, so there are a lot of scaling models which are coming in, which are now matured enough to be able to help even large organizations adopt Agile. And that's what this survey also shows. So size of organization with more than 20,000 people, 25% of these organizations are adopting Agile or already adopted Agile. Okay, so this is something to very closely look at. And these are not purely software organizations. Software organizations are more on the right side if you see. So more than 5,000 people, about 15% of IT software organizations have adopted Agile. So there is still a good way for Agile to be adopted by different organizations, different streams or types or domains. If you look at types of industries which are into Agile now, you look at those, and people mostly feel it is only with either IT or it is with financial services that are looking at Agile. But when you look at this list, even though the percentages are a bit smaller in other organizations or other domains, but they are catching up. So you look at professional services, you look at even government organizations as well. So I've been fortunate to be part of World Agility Forum, where we look at awarding organizations which are adopting Agile. And we had this year uh, even an NGO coming up and presenting how they have become Agile. You can't beat that, right? So, in non-government organization, in non-profit organizations, they are coming and telling us and presenting their case why they are Agile and what pushed them to be Agile in servicing people, and how agility helped them to service people better as an organization. So the fathom or myth of only IT software industry or basically the banking sector is more looking at adopting Agile is no longer valid now. We can look at organizations which are beyond IT software or even technology or even financial services moving to Agile as a method to deliver. So that is why it is equally important, and that is why PMI is also making conscious effort to bring in agility into their core, what you say, capability as well. Okay, moving on. Now look at areas even in IT software industry as well. It was mostly brought out that software development teams are more only suited for Agile. That was the initial conversation or initial outcome that we always looked at. But now it is going beyond only software development. So it is IT, even infrastructure. There are systems that are using Agile with DevOps coming in, cloud coming in, and then operations, marketing, HR. You name a particular organizational team or capability, they are looking at Agile now. So there is an Agile framework today, if you talk about, for every type of capability in an organization. So it is no longer restricted only to IT or software development. Why organizations are adopting Agile? One, accelerated software delivery. Now, we have seen in the earlier slides that organizations which are not into IT are also adopting. That means that is the impact of the digital transformation journeys each and every type of organizations in the world are going through. And that is the focus of the future generations that are coming up now. So they are all focused on digital media. They are no longer depending more on face-to-face conversations or face-to-face services. So that is also forcing organizations which are beyond IT to be more digital. And that means it is a direct positive for agile adoption into those organizations as well. So accelerated software delivery is the major reason, and also enhanced ability to manage changing priorities. These are the two major reasons pushing organizations into agile. Of course, there are other elements that you can look at as well. For example, reducing the project risks, improving project visibility, team morale, project costing as well, and improving the engineering discipline and better manage distributed teams. And distributed teams is something, at least in India, we all live with. Most of the operation centers that we have are extended teams mostly, because the majority of the decisions are made in the on-site areas, and we get projects for probably execution part here. So that also is a better way to manage distributed teams in Agile. So that is another reason as well for organizations to adopt Agile. Major areas, if you look at from an Agile way of delivering or way of working, the activities or the events that are undertaken in this, if you look at that, what techniques are employed by the teams or organizations. Daily stand-up scores the maximum, which means in a stand-up, we normally go ahead and represent what have we accomplished yesterday and what we would do today in order to be in line with what outcomes we have to deliver. And we highlight if you have any issues. This is the core thing that everybody is looking for. That means instead of trying to raise issues at the end, can you bring up issues as and when you face them? And they can be addressed so that the end goals or outcomes are not. And that is the major thing. And the second one, if you also look at, is the retrospective. Retrospective is something where you go and relook at what has happened in that particular sprint or a program increment, whatever you want to call that, based on the type of framework you are adopting. What has gone well and what has not gone well and what can be improved. And that is another area. That means you are trying to learn faster, fail faster, so that you can improve your future outcomes and be in line with the expectations of the customer. Learn from the customer much faster. Look at the team dynamics. Everything falls into a retrospective. So that is something very focused by organizations in terms of employing. Sprint planning, of course, iteration review. These are major events that we are looking at. The major things, if you see, are daily stand-up and retrospective. And at the bottom most, if you see, there is again an important element, agile portfolio planning, where we are using lean portfolio management techniques to move from project-based portfolios to product-based portfolios. Now that is also about 33%, which is huge. That means more organizations are adopting portfolio management, creating leaner, meaner portfolios which can easily adopt the changing business strategies. And business strategies are changing very, very fast in today's world. How are we measuring success in agile projects? The major focus of any agile project that we work on is delivering business value. That means everything we do, everything we work on, we look at whether is this particular element of value to the customers. Is it providing some value to the business or the product that we are working on? And that builds customer or end user satisfaction. So these are the two major success criteria for any agile project. So the focus is now on customer. Customer centricity is the way forward for organizations. And that is another reason why organizations are moving towards agile. Of course, there are other elements that you talk about: velocity, the speed with which we are delivering. Is it consistent? People talk about, when you talk about velocity, a lot of people think, okay, velocity of the team should continue to grow. That actually is not always the case. There are multiple elements, or I would say lot of elements, that can impact how a team's velocity is in any particular sprint or any iteration. But the velocity at least needs to be consistent, so that there is a certain level of predictability, or delivery certainty created for the customer. And that is another focus point in the agile adoption and measuring the success. If you look at the waterfall model of what we call as the iron triangle and agile project management model of the same triangle, in waterfall model, if you look at, the scope is always fixed, and we estimate the effort and the schedule or the time. So in agile, if you do that, then it is a reverse. That means your resources, the team is size is fixed, and the duration is fixed. Means either you are working on a sprint which is 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or you are working on a program increment which may be 3 months, or a iteration of release which is 3 months. So that means your schedule is fixed, your team size is fixed. Of course, there might be some attritions and all that, that is always there, but otherwise the resources are fixed, and what is estimated is what you would deliver. That we call that as an MVP, or minimum viable product, which we look at. So what you are focused in terms of when you are managing a project in a waterfall model is to manage the effort and the time. But when it comes to delivering projects in agile, the focus is on delivering the scope that is planned. So that is another major difference. Now let's look at some elements on certain characteristics of projects in an agile environment versus a traditional environment. Scope. When you look at scope of a project, as we just looked about in the earlier slide, the scope of a waterfall project is always fixed. Whereas when it comes to scope of an agile project, it is more estimated. That means based on the amount of effort you can put in, you're going to estimate what scope will be delivered. And that is the focus, and that is a major difference when it comes to projects. Second, the focus in waterfall model of projects is on outcomes. Are we delivering what we promised? When it comes to agile projects, the focus, as we saw in the earlier slides, is on looking at business value. Are we delivering business value for the customer that we promised with every iteration, with every release that we plan to provide for the customer? Next, in terms of adaptability for changes, adaptability of projects in waterfall is much lesser, because we try to gather all the requirements at the beginning and then look at building huge business requirement documentation, or solution architecture documents, or solution design documents. So it becomes very difficult for adapting changes into the projects. Whereas when it comes to agile, because it is delivered more at a smaller iterations, the adaptability is much higher as compared to the other area. How we measure progress. Now, when you are delivering projects in a waterfall model, we have stage gates, wherein we say our requirements documentation is complete. That is probably our first milestone. Then we will talk about design gate completion. That is our second milestone, which means our focus is on completing milestones as against looking at outcomes. Outcomes we only look at the end of the project. Now, when it comes to agile, the focus or progress is always measured on the business value delivered, and that's how the progress is measured. Have we delivered all the functionalities that we talked about for the customer in the iteration that we planned for? That is how the progress is measured. Come to sunk cost. That means there are projects that we do which no longer be viable possibly in the time to come. And when we stop projects in a waterfall model, whatever money we have spent, of course, is known as sunk cost. But the sunk costs are much higher when you compare to projects that are likely to be stopped in an agile environment, because whatever money you have spent on that project till that point in time would have delivered some value to the customer. That means you have realized some ROI from what is being already spent. So what could be lost is the last sprint on which you are working at that point of time, where the project is put on hold or project is asked to be stopped. That is the sunk cost that you are looking at. That means the sunk cost in a waterfall model of delivery is much higher if a project is abruptly stopped as compared to that when it is done in Agile. In Agile, it is very, very minimal. Portfolios are project-based. In a waterfall model, the project-based portfolio structure is created in organizations, and when you move to agile organizations, the portfolios are more product-based, and products then are broken down into value chains, which are aligned to different business processes, and then you further break them down into the sprint backlogs and what you want to deliver as MVP for each of the sprint or iteration. So that's how you manage. What it does is the funding becomes very fixed model in a project-based portfolio as against a product-based portfolio where the funding is very dynamic. That means your allocation of budgets is looked at from every quarter point of view. So every quarter you look at, okay, whether I still need to spend whatever money I have catered for on this particular product. If that product is no longer viable or no longer feasible or needed to the customer going forward, you can stop the funding then and there and realign based on your strategic priorities of the organization. So it gives you a greater flexibility as an organization to realign your funding, realign your strategy quite dynamically. And that is the advantage of having product-based portfolios as against project-based portfolios. So in project-based portfolio, you fund projects and programs. In product-based portfolios, you fund value chains or value streams, whatever you want to call that as. And that brings in a major difference in allocation of budget and how the finances are managed in an organization. The team sizes usually when we talk about projects in waterfall model are larger as compared to agile where the team sizes are smaller. That means until unless you are using scaled models of implementation where you have a tribe of maximum of 150 people. But when it comes to large projects that we deliver, we can have team sizes which are much, much higher as compared to a tribe size that we would have in an agile project. Customer interaction in terms of when you go back to the customer and let them know. In a waterfall model, mostly we go back in the governance structure to the customers or major stakeholders at the completion of each milestone. That means once you finalize a business requirements or set of requirements from the customer, we go back to them only when we have probably a solution document ready, right, to go and review. Many times even solution documentation is more technology driven. So the interaction mostly with the stakeholders or the customers is at milestones. Whereas in an agile project, it is throughout the project or throughout the delivery, customers are engaged. That also gives us an ability to gain faster feedback, which in turn helps us to realign our priorities, our way of delivering or what we are delivering for the customer to create a greater satisfaction and also adapt changes faster, and we can fail faster as well. So we have seen major projects failing at the fag end because by the time the duration of the project is completed and what we have to deliver is taken care of, the whole product or the outcome that we are trying to deliver is no longer needed. So that puts us at a very different way of looking at that project, and we call that as a failure. And also, if there is a major change coming in at the end of the project, then adaptability becomes that much higher. That means realignment costs are very high. So as compared to what we do in an agile environment. Last but not the least, changes. In waterfall model, we always look to resist a change because it can impact our whole effort that has gone in till that point in time when a change is brought in. So we resist the change most of the times. When we look at agile, we are all more proactive to look at accepting the change because the effort we would put in is much lesser, or the adaptability is much faster, and what we need to change is much lesser. The component that is impacted or that needs to change is much lesser as compared to how it would look like in a waterfall model. So these are some project management characteristics that I thought we would bring about, so it is very clear when you are moving from managing projects in a waterfall model, if you want to move into managing projects in an agile environment, what we need to look at are what changes essentially. And this will drive what we as project managers need to change within ourselves. Now, let's talk about us as project managers, what we need to change if we have to, or if you are looking to transition from being a project manager in waterfall model to or traditional model to a agile organization. First one, ownership. So, and this is a major change for us. In a traditional model, we as project managers are responsible, have the ownership to ensure that the project is successful. That means if a project fails, then the knife is on our head or our neck. So that means the ownership for ensuring the successful delivery of a project is with project manager in a traditional environment. When it comes to an agile organization or agile projects, it is collective ownership. Each and every person in the team, including the product owner who we call as our customer or our client in environment, is also responsible and have the ownership. And part of ownership is with the product owner to are met. So it's a collective ownership. A team, a project manager, think the very big change in terms of in process. The second one, role. We as project managers are more authoritarian in our role because of the ownership that is on us. So we tend to look at managing the team and controlling what they do so that we deliver the outcomes that we have promised to our stakeholders. So our role is more of controlling how the things are taken care of, how the delivery is happening, how the planning is happening. We look to control, and that puts us as more authoritarian in our role as project managers. But when we look at agile, our role is more collaborative. We are collaborating with the team because it's a collective ownership. Whether we succeed or fail, we do that as a team. So our style of management or style of leadership should be more collaborative than as compared to what we do in a traditional environment of controlling what is done and what is delivered. So that role, what we perform also changes. This should change how we think, how we lead, and how we interact with the people. As I said, our focus in traditional world is on managing the cost, managing the schedule. Outcomes will happen if we manage the cost and manage the schedule, because we would have gone into a very low level of detail to identify which tasks need to be performed and which task is mapped to what outcome. And we are pretty sure that, okay, if there are no changes which we don't anticipate or which we are not very proactive to accept, if the team follows the schedule given and keeps delivering the tasks or keeps accomplishing the tasks that we are talking about, we are more or less guaranteed of achieving the outcomes with the quality that we have promised the stakeholders. That means our focus is on maintaining that schedule and also the plan and the effort put in by the teams. That's our focus point. When you are managing projects in Agile, as we discussed earlier, the focus is on not on the effort, it is on the value. It is on the objectives that we have promised or the sprint goals that we have taken. Everything that the team does, the only question we ask, are we in line with accomplishing the objective that we have promised? Are we in line with getting the key results that we are looking at, which can give us an indication or validation of achieving those objectives? Are we impacting any goals that we have promised the customer? Are we still in line to deliver the value that we have promised the customer? So the focus completely is not on how much time the team is spending on a certain task or whether they are completing certain tasks or not. It's about looking at the delivery of business value and whether we are in line with that, whether what we are delivering is of usefulness to the customer, whether it will get them the business value that we have promised, whether the satisfaction levels will improve. And that is what we look at. So the entire focus of us as project managers changes completely from looking at the effort and the time to the value delivered or the goals or the objectives always. So that's another change in our mindset that we need to have. Leadership in traditional model, we look to lead from front. Means we as project managers are in front of the team and leading them. That's how our leadership style would be, because we have the ownership to ensure that all the deliverables are provided to the customers or stakeholders as we set out to in the project charter. When you talk about Agile, because it is more collective ownership, you are supposed to be leading from the back. That's what I call it as. That means you are part of the team. You are putting the team in front always. You are supporting the team and you are standing behind to take care of whatever issues they might have, whatever constraints they are facing from an organization perspective or within the tribe or within the team. You are looking to collaborate for them in managing the interdependencies with other team. So you are collaborating not just with the team, it is both inter teams and intra teams. So the style of leadership is more collaborative. That means you lead as part of the team, or much better, leading from the back of the team. That means you are putting team in the front, putting the ownership on them, giving them autonomy, and trying to drive the team standing behind them. So that is another major change for us, where in traditional model you are on focus always. wherever you go, whatever interactions are happening, whether it is in a governance forum or with the client, wherever you are presenting, most of the time the focus is on us as project managers. But when we move to a agile environment, the focus is always on the team. If you have a customer showcase to happen, demo to happen, it is the team that does the demo. When the requirement clarifications are happening, the team does it. When you are planning, the team does the effort and they give the confidence that we will be able to achieve what we are setting out for this iteration. So as leaders have to move from leading from front to leading, being part of the team to a collective leadership model, or even lead from the back. That is something also that will change. The next one, customer interaction, as we talked about, it is about interacting with the customers as frequently as possible. That means the more you interact with the customer, the faster you get the feedback. The faster you get the feedback, the faster the validation whether what you are delivering is what they are looking for. And if there are changes, the changes are much minimal because you would have interacted with them right at the beginning of a certain design, or creating wireframes, or creating a certain function. So every time you are going back to the customer and showcasing what you are planning to deliver, so the customer interactions are much more frequent, or you can say very, very regular as compared to what it would have in the traditional environment. And that happens through the team. And that's another major change for us to look at. Delegation. Now, when it comes to delegation in traditional environment, we delegate tasks to the team. That means we define what all tasks needs to be undertaken by the team, and we delegate them for the team to take ownership for. When it comes to agile environment, the delegation is not on tasks. Delegation is on authority, authority to make decisions. So we all work in autonomous teams, or self-managed teams, or self-directed teams, whatever you want to call that as. That means there is a greater autonomy in decision making for the teams, of course, within the boundaries that have been defined. So what we delegate in a project management in traditional environment as tasks is more delegating authority to make decisions, or making changes, or even planning or effort estimation. Everything is with the team. And another change that we have to look for, team management. When we talk about, the team size, as we said, is much smaller, and we more look at directing the team in a traditional environment. But when you talk about managing the team, it's more collaborative, and we have to be part of the team. It's like whatever we do is being done collectively as a team. So we have to move from directive style of management or team leading to more collaborative or complementary style of team management. Decision making. When it comes to decision making, again, we take ownership as project managers to make certain decisions, whether to go with a change. We do seek inputs from the team in terms of impact, but whether to accept the change or not, that decision making is mostly done by us as project managers. But when it comes to agile environment, again, because we are a collaborative team and teams are more autonomous, the decision making is done by the team. So it's again a big shift in terms of accepting how we operate in a traditional environment. And if we have been in that environment for much longer time, the more longer you are in a certain environment, our behaviors, our habits, they become that much more stronger. Our belief system becomes that much more stronger, and it takes that much longer for us to change ourselves to map to the needs of a different environment. So that is why I'm trying to bring up these elements. Some may look a bit repetitive, but these are very finer elements for us to look at as project managers, and these things can go a long way in how the environment is, where we are working, and what sort of team we are building, and how successful we will be in that particular organization. Change, we talked about this earlier also. We should be more acceptable to change, or we should be more looking forward for changes, because change is the only constant in today's world. So everything is likely to change. So that whole mindset of whatever requirements are given to me are written in stone, and we should not change anything. That once we accept something is something we need to change. So that's a major element for us also to look at, from managing projects in a traditional environment. So we do resist a lot of change because we capture all the requirements so comprehensively at the beginning of the project, and the requirements are anywhere up to 3,000, 5,000 requirements sometimes in big projects. So that is why we resist the change, because any change that comes is very, very highly impacting to whatever we have done so far. So here it is different. So we need to be more proactive, more looking for change to see if there is a need for us to even realign because of the changing strategies or changing needs of the external customers that we are working for. Last but not the least, requirements in agile environment are more ambiguous. That means we need to be comfortable, be certain about being uncertain. That means uncertainty is something which is going to be there always in an agile environment. And in traditional environment, we all ensure certainty of whatever we do. Here, lot of uncertainty, lot of ambiguity, and that acceptance of things changing, things being ambiguous at the beginning, and letting them evolve as we progress. Many times customers even don't know what they are looking for. So they'll just say, I'm looking for something like this. So how do you deal with it? Because the requirements, we are very used to having a huge set of requirements which are very certain, very fine tuned to the needs of the organization or the customer or the outcome that we are looking for. It's a big mindset change again for us to be able to manage something which is ambiguous and which can evolve over a period of time. What you start with may end up with something else after a certain point in time, based on how the customer is looking to evolve, or how the product manager is looking to evolve that particular product itself. So the way you operate, way you look for acceptance should change. Accepting ambiguity, accepting uncertainty is the need, or the is the order of the day for agile project managers. So we'll look at this slide and then take a break. So if you look at what roles a project program manager can play in an agile environment, why I'm talking about this again is, any agile organization, if you go to, most of the time the designation of project manager is supposedly not required, because we all talk about structures managing the culture, structures defining the culture. So we tend to look at giving different titles or different role designations for project managers. Some could be more collaborative, some could still need the traditional management skills. So again, as I said, project management as a skill is required definitely in an agile environment as well. And that's what I have seen in my experience in leading agile transformation also. So the first role we can look for is that of a scrum master, especially people who are not knowing much about agile and you want to move into an agile environment. I think this is a very good area to start with, because you are working with a smaller team trying to understand what is being implemented. If you want to know more about Scrum Master, you can read 8 stances of Scrum Master. which is written by Barry Overeem. It's a very good white paper which you can download and which you can read about various stances a Scrum Master should play. And it demands a lot of collaboration skills to play that role of a Scrum Master. So that will help us to change our mindset from being in a traditional environment moving to an agile environment. There is also some organizations which operate on a Spotify model of Spotify framework, if you want to call that as, of agile implementation, which is famously being adopted by a lot of large organizations, is a tribe performance lead. That means you are looking at how the tribe is delivering outcomes for or the value to the business, how the teams are interacting within a tribe, how their performance in terms of delivery is, how the capabilities are built within the tribe. So that is a role which also we can look for. Release train engineer, this is more of a scaled agile role, if you want to look at. Again, it involves a lot of collaboration and coordination within a tribe or a release train that we call as. So you are supposed to be managing outcome from a group of probably 150 people within agile release train or lesser based on how the teams are structured, and it involves managing interdependencies and intradependencies. And some also call this role as a chief scrum master. That means you are supposed to be collaborating with scrum masters of each of these teams to ensure we are delivering the objectives that we planned for. The famous agile coach role, of course, definitely. Again, there is a big shift in the personality traits we need as or we would have built as project managers in a traditional environment to be moving to the role of an agile coach. But nothing is impossible if we are really looking to change ourselves and adapt to the needs of that particular role and build our skills. So agile coach role again is an important role, especially the skills that we build as change agents and how you manage the change, how you are able to influence people comes in very handy for a coach role as well. There are complementary skills that we need to build. Yes, we can look at it if you are keenly interested. Product manager, as if you are technically sound or if you are business wise very sound in a particular domain, you can look to take the role of being a product manager. What we need to evolve is the skills of visualizing an evolved product, providing a product vision, and how you look at evolution of a product right from scratch, how you design or ideate a product and then look to evolve that particular product into something which is of utility for the customers and also something which is of business value or benefit for the organization. Are you able to build unicorn products which are unique? That is something which we would need, but it is also a role we as project managers can look for if you have the domain expertise, especially the business domain expertise. Feature team manager, feature teams are the cross-functional teams within an organization or within a tribe of an organization. So this is another role where you can adapt yourself because this role deals with delivery of outcomes or business value for that particular team where it is contributing to in the value chain. So this is another role which as project managers we can easily adopt to. Again, whatever we talked about in the earlier slides, we need to change ourselves to be able to accept and build those skills or competencies which are required for that particular role. So these are some roles we can target as project managers who are being in these roles and move to an agile environment. So there is a lot of apprehension when we talk to project managers. Okay, what will we do in an agile environment? So these are some things which we can look for and build our skill sets so that we are not left out in this whole agile transformation journeys and organizations moving to agile. So if you are one of those very apprehensive about what will happen to you, try to see which is your nearest role that you can reach based on the skill sets you have today, and what is the minimum change required, so that you can go ahead and push yourself or present yourself for that role, or even start learning those skill sets which are required for you to transition successfully. So this is something which I thought could be useful for us all to look at. We left. So as if you are moving to agile environment for project management or any other roles, what are the things, some things, not everything that we can cover here, some things that we need to learn. The first one is breaking down large requirements into smaller chunks. So that is something we should learn. We should learn how to do, how to engage with business, understand their requirements, which are more one liner or two liners, and how you can break them down into smaller chunks of requirements that are more manageable, that are more understandable for the team that we are uh, so that is something which is very much required for project managers in an agile environment. So we call the big requirements as epics, and then you need to break down epics into themes and user stories. That is something we need to try and learn actually. Okay. The second one, engaging customers throughout the delivery. So as I mentioned, we are used to going back to our customers only at the completion of major milestones. So we need to be very conscious to keep engaging the customer throughout the delivery. So how and what events we need to engage the customers. Of course, agile frameworks do come with the relevant events where we will be more forced to go and engage the customer as well. But even without that, we should look for as many opportunities to engage with the customer as possible throughout the project delivery that we do. Next, we should learn that the focus always should be on iterative delivery of business value. That means instead of looking at delivering outcomes at the end and focusing on effort and try to maintain the schedule, it's in agile environment, it's of no relevance if you are not delivering the minimum viable product that is required or that is promised or that is set as a sprint goal or an objective. So that is something we have to be very careful about. Empowering teams to be autonomous. This is something which we are not used to. So that is something we have to learn how to empower teams, how to build high performing teams, how to build relationship with the team and trust with the team, and also trust amongst the team members itself. How do you manage conflicts within the team, and how you can empower the team to manage the conflict? Because the point is, if somebody is coming to you in a team with a complaint against somebody else, that means we need to not directly try to engage conversations. We need to understand that there is lack of trust between those two individuals. If there is a level of trust, that means they both can engage each other and resolve that conflict. So if the moment somebody is coming to us for resolving conflict, that means there is an absence of trust. So how you look at things that are coming to you will also change the moment you think about always empowering the team or building autonomous teams which are high performing. Okay, that is something we need to look for as well. So look at team dynamics, how the teams are interacting, how the teams are behaving with each other, what is their status of relationships. Is there somebody who is trying to become a leader within the team as well? So when this also happens, there are different types of people. So we will see that in certain times somebody is trying to stand up and become a leader again. So we again need to go back and have one-on-one conversations where required, group conversations where required. So general conversations based on the need of the situation and the context. But the main thing is we need to look out for those aspects within the team. We need to keep watching the team dynamics and see whether they are autonomous, they are empowered, they are making the right decisions which are in line with our goals and objectives. Focus always on business value that is to be delivered. Always look out for any impact to the value, any impact to the customer satisfaction. That is something which we need to learn to focus than on effort and time and the outcome or the output. So it is always on the value, whether we are delivering value that we promised, whether the value we are delivering is still relevant in the time or at the time we are delivering is also something we need to ask and question ourselves. Focus on building team credibility, and credibility comes from consistency of delivery. So that means we have to be very much focused always on whether we are promising what we will deliver. Is that something we are aligned to? And that is what builds credibility for our teams. That is what builds credibility for us as an organization as well. So that is something we need to very clearly articulate and also look to build consistency in our effort, consistency in our quality, consistency in delivering value to the business that we set out for. That is something which is very, very important, and that builds the credibility and predictability of the team. And that is what builds the customer trust and satisfaction levels as well. Focus on objectives and key results. This is another new phenomenon that we are bringing into agile environment. So you go to all agile organizations now, they are moving away from the MVPs and goals, and that they are trying to align the outcomes or the value to the objectives and the key results. Objectives are nothing but what we are set out, whether it is strategically or tactically, and key results will help us to validate that we have achieved those objectives. So this is something again that could be an entirely separate session. There are training mechanisms on OKRs as well, but that is something also which is fast catching up in the environment. So it's important we start looking at focusing on objectives and key results that we need to achieve. So these are some things which we want to learn. Now moving on, okay, we did have the break. So let's look at the learning stages. So this is something which is very famously brought out in a book called Coaching for Performance. So you can look at that book. It's a great book for coaches and also leaders as well. So it talks about 4 steps in building our competence. So it starts with unconscious incompetence, which means we don't know what we don't know. So there are a lot of elements that we don't know. We hardly know, probably 1% of that also is very high when I talk about of what knowledge exists in this whole world. So we don't know many things. So when we don't know what we don't know, we are in a state of unconscious incompetence. So just a moment, let me see how I can put on my video here. Just one moment. Am I still visible? No, I think we'll go ahead. I
No,
don't
you need to
see.
start the video on.
Okay, just one moment, please. I'm trying to see. Let me stop this and see if that comes. Okay, I think it should be visible now.
Yeah, it's okay. Visible.
Okay. Yeah. So moving from unconscious incompetence, that means when we don't know what we don't know, we are in a state of unconscious incompetence. But the moment we know what we don't know, means we have reached a state of conscious incompetence. So we don't know what we don't know. So at least we know what we don't know. So that means we are in a state of conscious incompetence. Then from there, as you start learning, you will start moving into a state of conscious competence. Means to start building your knowledge, your understanding, and as you practice more, you start building your capability, and capability as you are able to build further, you build expertise in that particular area. That is competence. So these are different elements. So you move to conscious competence. Now, unconscious competence is something where you can do things even without focusing on that particular element. If I have to talk about an example, if it's like driving. So when you don't know driving, you are in a state of conscious incompetence. So the moment you start learning driving, as you start driving in the initial stages, and we all would have gone through this, that you will start looking at which gear you are in, whether your clutch is right, you are pressing the clutch right, you are braking. So you are focusing on lot of things consciously. So you are building your conscious competence. But as you drive, consistently, as you practice driving, you are going for long drives, you will arrive at a state where you are no longer required to concentrate on which gear you are in, or whether you are able to brake right way, whether your foot is on the clutch at that point in time, how you are able to shift between your accelerator and brake. So you move to from a conscious competence state to unconscious competence. So even while you are driving, you can probably, if you have a speaker and mic in your car, you can, which comes now in every car. So you are able to attend calls, you are able to attend to music, or you are able to watch videos also. So you are concentrating on doing something else as well while you are unconsciously driving. So that is something, a state where you reach from conscious incompetence to unconscious competence. And that's how we learn. That means what I'm intending to say is lot of behaviors that we have are reaching a state of unconscious competence, and we don't realize that we are behaving certain way, or we have built certain habits which are no longer visible to us until unless we are not conscious about them. So we are unconscious to most of our behaviors, most of our habits, which may be good, which may not be good. And our focus would be on those which are not good or not right for the environment or the context where we operate. So this is the human learning stages. It's if you want more on this, the book I refer to is Coaching for Performance. It's a great book. You can always go ahead and look at it in more contextually. Now, we all look at three stages: learning, unlearn, and relearning. So when you are moving from a one particular type of environment to another environment, we have to go through all these three stages. Just trying to learn something new or going and attending a 2-day agile trainings, or I'm not against that. That is a foundation, but it does not give you the capabilities or competencies required fully to be in that mindset. So it's important we start looking at a framework which can help you to go through all these three processes of learning, unlearning, and relearning. Now let's look at what are these four. So first, start. What is that you don't know today, which you need to start doing so that you are successful in the new environment? And that's what we looked at in the earlier stages, what to learn. What is something new that you have to learn for being successful, or what are the new behaviors, habits that you need to start exhibiting so that you are successful in the new environment that you are getting into. The second one, what is that you are doing today which you should continue to do? That is another element as well. Not everything you are doing today is not relevant in the new world. So there are certain elements or the certain competencies which would still be relevant. Managing interdependencies, managing risks, looking at the outcomes, looking at team dynamics. Those are skills which we deploy even today in our traditional environment, which would also be required in the new environment. So we need to identify what is that I need to learn new, what is that I need to continue to exhibit, which I am exhibiting today, so that I continue to be successful in the new environment as well. And these two elements constitute to learning. Okay. Starting something new, continuing what I am doing today, continuing to exhibit whatever I am exhibiting today in terms of behaviors and habits. So these two contribute to learning. The next one is what is that you are doing today which has to be modified or which has to be changed a little bit. A tweaking is required in terms of what you are doing today so that you are able to continue to be successful in the new environment. And this is what is called relearning. So we talked about learning, which is something to learn new, something to continue what you are doing today. And the next one is relearning, which means you have to change or modify what you are doing today, tweak it a bit. And the last but not the least is something which we call as unlearning, which you should stop. For example, command and control, controlling the environment, controlling the team, that we need to stop doing. So this is something which we need to stop, which can help us success to be successful. That means you need to let go of your control. You need to let go of your focus on certain parameters of projects. So we will look at what to unlearn. So that is what we are talking about in terms of unlearning. We already talked about learning. So unlearning is about something which you should stop exhibiting in terms of behaviors or habits or stop doing in terms of competencies. So that is something which we will look at. So unlearning as a definition, it has been, it's not something today, but it is not very prevalent. Even when I started writing the book, I did a lot of research to find if there is some enough material to look for. I could not get much. I have only one white paper I could get, or research paper I may call. That was the only thing I could get on unlearning. So unlearning as they define is shown to be as a memory elimination in a system. That means if you, again, there is another book I will refer to, which I have mentioned in my book as well, is Power of Habit. So how you develop habits, and once you have developed a certain habit, what it does is it goes ahead and creates a neural connection. That means every habit has a cue, has an action, and has a outcome that it looks for, or a outcome that we see. So that means if there is a certain cue, or if I may say, if drinking tea is the cue, and that means you get into a certain situation or you get stressed, you would look to drink tea, and what it does to you, maybe it gives you certain relaxation. So your habit of drinking number of teas is maybe defined by your stress levels. That's how we form habits. So every habit, as you practice it more and more, starts creating our neural connections to make it more subconscious or unconscious. That's why we refer to unlearning as more of a elimination of that neural connection. And it could be done subconsciously, unconsciously, or consciously. So in the book, I refer to conscious process of unlearning. So that is something we are looking for. Unconscious and subconscious things keep happening. You might have read a lot of Pythagoras theorems and Rhombus theorems. Do you remember today what exactly it is and how you achieve what it is required from that? We may not, because that memory is eliminated because we are no longer using those techniques or those knowledge. That means that is subconsciously or unconsciously removed from our memory system without even knowing. But it takes a long time for that to happen. We are talking about conscious unlearning process. So another definition that they talk about is it's a gradual continuous process that occurs along with the learning. So when you are learning something, you also should look for what I should unlearn, so that our neural connections are gradually removed which are existing, and we replace them with the new habits that we are talking about. So that is what is called as unlearning. Now, what to unlearn, whether it is skills, competencies, capabilities, behaviors, or habits. Most of the time, we also see that we kind of use these three, at least the skills, competencies, and capabilities, more synonymously. But actually, these three are quite different. Okay, skills, competencies, capabilities are entirely different to each other. Even behaviors and habits are different. Yes, our habits might drive certain behaviors, and our behaviors might result in forming habits, definitely. But those two are different things. They are related, but they are different. They are not same. So, what should we unlearn? We should learn one or all of these based on what we are looking to build, or what capabilities we are looking to build, or what habits we are looking to build, or on the need of the new environment that we are referring to. So not just what we need to unlearn is one thing, it could be one or more of these elements that we are talking about. Now, if you are getting, I'm just giving few examples, if you are getting into certain roles, what you should unlearn, but you can find more, or it is again unique to each individual. What I'm trying to highlight is more generic in sense. But if individually you are looking to try and unlearn certain things, we have to go through some coaching mechanism and framework as well, so that we identify the right elements for you to unlearn. But in general, if you are moving into a role of unlearn, exhibiting authority, as I said, Scrum Master doesn't have any authority in a team. He is just a collaborator for the team. He is a servant leader. So he or she is always there for the team. So that is something we have to definitely unlearn. Making decisions for the team. So we don't take the decisions. Decisions are made by the team for themselves. This is something again which we need to unlearn. Shielding failures. Again, we celebrate failures, which means we make it visible to others as well. So you don't start ridiculing failures or shielding the team failures. Why we do that? So that others learn from those mistakes rather than repeating the same mistake. If I have done some mistake, if I don't come out and tell in a forum of people, tomorrow somebody else might commit the same mistake. By at least making it or celebrating those, when we say celebrating, at least making it visible for everybody in the team, we avoid duplication of those failures. That is something which is very important to remember. Comparing performance. Do not compare individual performance. We don't reward individuals in an agile environment. We need to reward the teams, so that there is more. Don't manage the team. Team should be self-managed. So these are some things. If you are trying to get into the role of a scrum master, you should try and look to unlearn. Stop exhibiting these behaviors is something which you should look for. Now, what to unlearn in if you are in the agile project manager role? So, or you can talk about RTE or release train engineer or a tribe performance lead, which are more project management based or program management based roles. So what are the things that you should look to unlearn? The first thing is stop focusing on milestones. Start focusing on business value. So this is the simultaneous learning and unlearning that we are talking about. Stop focusing on milestones, start focusing on business value or the objectives and key results. That is something which is a key for us to be successful. Stop resisting change. We are used to this. Again, this is a third or fourth time we are looking at these things, but these are very important. This is what is needed to change for us to be really successful in the agile environment. Stop resisting change, be more progressive, be more accepting, be more growth minded so that you are continuously looking at accepting the change. Exercising authority. Stop exercising authority. Look for collaboration. Look for empowering the team to make decisions. Yes, if those decisions are possibly going to fail, you can provide your inputs. Challenge the team constructively so that they go ahead and introspect themselves and figure out that okay, this is possibly not the right decision. But don't exercise authority, over the team. Being captain of the ship. So it is a collective effort in an agile environment. So that means we no longer have a sole ownership or wholesome ownership as captains in project environment. We need to unlearn that element as well. Start delegating authority, start empowering the team, let them be autonomous. You can guide on how to make the right decisions. That decision making capability needs to be built within the team so that your role is to make the team more self-sustainable, not to keep that dependency on yourself. That's why we say lead from the back rather than leading from the front. Stop having fixed mindset. That means don't be rigid on this is how we will do things or this is how things are being done here. That is the kind of mindset we all have. So we need to be more progressive, be more growth mindset. Means you need to be more pro experimentation. It's okay. It's because we are doing things in smaller chunks, we fail faster. And that is how you encourage innovativity, innovation, and creativity in the team. So don't have a fixed, rigid mindset. So we need to more develop growth mindset. And again, there is no 100% growth mindset people or 100% fixed mindset people. We have each and every one of us have both elements. We all are fixed mindset in certain environments where our beliefs are very stronger. Even a person who may call himself or herself to be completely growth minded may also or will also definitely have certain element of rigidity in certain area where their beliefs are so strong that they will not accept any deviation coming from that belief system. But we should try and see how majorly we can be growth minded than be completely fixed mindset or majorly fixed mindset oriented. So that is something also to unlearn. Stop focusing on cost and effort. Again, repeating the same thing. Because we are so cost oriented and schedule oriented, we need to get away, let it go from our system. Last but not the least, again, we are talking about managing the team. So please stop managing the team. Let the team manage themselves. They are fully capable. What we need to build, if they are not capable, is their capability to self manage, their ability to be interacting with each other, be developing trust, be developing the relationship between themselves, be able to resolve the conflicts, remove their egos, be in a state of growth mindset, means where they continuously look to improve, share knowledge within the team, develop everybody to be realizing their full potential. So these are certain elements which we need to look for, and that is what we can contribute with our experience and expertise for building the high performing teams for the organizations. And when we do build those high performing teams, collection of those teams is what makes an organization high performing. So that is something we should all aspire for, and our focus should be on creating high performing organizations which are very nimble, very flexible, very adaptable to the ever dynamic changes that are happening in the world around us. So that is the great contribution we all can make, we all can bring to the table. So this is something we all need to focus and start changing our mindset from what we are today to what is actually required for us to be successful. So this is something I thought could be very interesting for all of us to look at and explore. So I think I've come to the end of my session. So if you want to connect with me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, of course. I have my personal website as well. You can always look at that and try to reach out. So look forward to interacting probably again in future. If you have any questions that we have to take, I'm happy to look at those questions. Ketan, over to you.
Thanks, Nivati, for that beautiful session. I think there are a few questions in QA panel. I'll just go through it and we can take those questions one by one.
Yeah.
One is your book on unlearning just a general book or project or program management based?
It's a general book applicable to any audience, so it is not specific to project or program managers. It's more around the concept, and it also outlines a framework, self-coaching framework on how you can identify what you have to unlearn and all the elements that are required or all competencies that we need to build to go through that learning, unlearning, relearning process. So it's more targeted towards general audience, not specific to any particular role or specific to an individual per se. So that can definitely help anybody who is looking to unlearn or learn or relearn or change their orientation from a certain area of work to another area of work.
Okay, there is one more. How do you define key results and how it is different from objectives?
Okay, objectives. If I take an example, my objective is to be a marathon runner, right? So I want to run marathon. That is my objective. What will tell me that I am a marathon runner is possibly running full marathons in a year. So the objective is to be a marathon runner. My key results, which can validate that I am a marathon runner or I have become a marathon runner, is at least if I can run 3 full marathons in a year. So that is the relationship between an objective and a key results. Objective gives you the outcome that you are looking for. Key result is something, that quantifiable element which can help you validate that you are achieving that objective. That is the relationship between objective and a key result.
Okay, great. There's another one. How successful is hybrid project management, that is agile plus waterfall, where contractual obligations and customer orientation are not fully aligned with agile way of working?
It is contextual, so there is no, I think, straightforward answer to this, because it depends on the context. Not every project can be done in agile or should be done in agile, or every project should be done in waterfall. So there are elements or types of projects which can be more effective done in a traditional model. There are projects which are more effective when you do it in agile, and there are combinations as well, and we have done all that. So it depends on the context of that particular project, how effective it will be. To give a generic answer to say whether it will be effective or not, I think for me it would be more foolish, because I don't understand the context in which that is being spoken. So I would rather say it is more contextual to that particular project scope or the outcome we are looking for and how it can be successful.
Great. One more. How leadership can help in empowering the teams with the decision-making power in agile world?
It is maximum emphasis is on leadership because we are all used to making decisions for somebody. Even when we schedule meetings, we are going there into a meeting, and we all do that as leaders and project managers, that we have already have certain decisions made. We go to the team more to validate or communicate those decisions, not actually to get inputs from them. Right. So leadership plays a big role in making a team autonomous or empowered. It is for the leadership to do that. But also there are situations, and I have seen those many times. There are leaders who are ready to let go of their ownership, but teams are not ready to take ownership. And that comes from a fear of failure or a fear of being targeted for a certain failure. So as leaders, it is for us to create that psychologically safe environment where the team is more forthcoming or more coming forward to make decisions, and they do that only when they know that my decision, if it fails tomorrow, I will not be ridiculed, I will not be targeted for making that decision. So leadership plays a very big role, or I would say the most significant role in empowering teams to be autonomous. Without leadership participation or without leadership active letting go of their control and creating that psychologically safe environment, you cannot create high performing teams or autonomous teams.
Okay, there is something on the statistics which you had presented in initial slides. The question is, are these statistics for India only, or are you including the US too?
It is a global statistics, whatever I have shared. So you can look at First Source Agile 2020 report. So it's Agile survey report. So it's across the globe. It's not just India. It is US, Europe, Australia. It's everything. So I have not referred anything specific to India here. It's a global phenomenon that we are looking at.
Okay, and there is one thing on the book which you are referring. What is the name of Learn, Unlearn, and Relearn book?
Okay, there is no learn, unlearn, relearn book as a whole. It is a overall concept that that has been there in the system, and I try to emphasize on unlearning because I didn't see much, or I have not seen anything specific on unlearning. But overall, the learning model or learning stages, if you look at anywhere on Google, so it talks about three elements: learn, unlearn, and relearn. Learn and relearn are more external, which means you learn from somebody, looking at somebody. So it's more inside out. But the unlearning process is purely internal. That means you have to put the effort yourself. It is more outside in. Look at outside what people are successful with, what habits, what behaviors they are exhibiting to be successful, and look back inward to see whether you have those habits, you have built in such belief system. So it's more outside in. So that's what we are looking at. So there is no specific book on learn, unlearn, relearn. But what I refer to, what if you are wanting to understand how to build a performing team or how to coach people for performance, there is a book called Coaching for Performance, which is a great book. You can look at that book for sure. Another book I refer to was Power of Habit. Again, how habits are formed. That's also a great book you can look at.
Okay, this is an interesting one. Who manages cost, risk, etc. in Scrum?
Cost is an attribute to the effort. So Again, it is up to the product owner or product management team to manage the costs. It's not with the project manager. So that is one point. Risks, again, it is a collective ownership. When you are identifying risks are part of any system, whether it is agile or it is traditional. But only thing is the amount of risk that you are taking in an agile environment is much smaller compared to what you would have in the traditional environment because of the restriction in scope. Because the scope is smaller, because you are talking about minimum viable product that you are releasing of a product increment in 3 months, the amount of risk that you are looking at is also much smaller. Again, the ownership rests on both the product management team and the team. It's a collective ownership that is on everybody. But cost management is with the product management.
Something similar to that is who takes care of these financial measures.
Yes, that is with the product management group.
Okay. And then there is how is business value measured in agile delivery?
There are different ways of measuring business value. So there is no standard way. Again, SAFe has their own way of cost of delay and measuring the business value. But overall, if you look at business value, what we do in our organization is an absolute number, which is driven by the priority and urgency of that particular requirement. That means the business sponsors or the business representatives, based on the urgency of a certain requirement and priority of that requirement, and we all know that priority and urgency creates an impact. So based on the impact a certain requirement creates and the value it can bring, they give an absolute value anywhere between 0 to 100. And they cannot give 100 to every business value, every requirement, because we challenge that. You cannot have all as priority 1. So that is something we need to remember. But mostly it is an absolute number. Relativity comes from the priority and urgency, which can result in the right impact for that particular requirement for business.
Okay. Which was the white paper you had mentioned on Scrum Master?
Okay, the white paper is called 8 Stances, STANCES, 8 Stances of a Scrum Master. It is written by Barry Overeem. So you can look at that. Look for 8 Stances of a Scrum Master and you will find it. It's a great white paper for any starters to read on Scrum Mastery. You want a book on Scrum Mastery? There is a book called Scrum Mastery by Jeff Watts. One of the great books for Scrum Masters again. You can read that book as well.
Okay. Can product implementation project executed in Agile? For financial projects, the bid is based on RFPs. How Agile can get applied in such projects?
There is Agile contract management as well. So it is nothing different. As I said, in the initial stages, we had a lot of constraints on how to manage vendors in an Agile environment, how to create RFPs for Agile projects. All that now has, I think, more or less gone, because even we are talking about HR in Agile. So even sales in Agile. So there are frameworks that have been built which have been practically implemented and applied. So everything that you are doing in a traditional environment now can be more or less done in Agile. There are still elements, but all these can be taken care. There is Agile contract management. Please go ahead and look for it in sales in Agile. Okay, you can look at that. Even HR in Agile is also there. How you manage the recruitment processes, how to create a role-based organization. We are going through the process of creating a role-based organization, which entirely takes away the career growth path of becoming a tech lead, a manager, or a VP or a director. Entirely, it takes away the whole phenomenon. That means we are moving away from traditional hierarchical-based growth to more expertise-based growth. So there is progression in every area of organizations towards Agile. And definitely there is Agile contract management as well.
Thanks. This is interesting one. What is the established way of faster unlearning? or any recommendation on unlearning effectively?
You can read my book, definitely. I would say that. So, if you want that, yes, faster way of unlearning is how conscious you are. You know, the more conscious you are, the more aware you are about your behaviors that you are exhibiting on day-to-day basis, the reflection you are putting on yourself, how much time you are spending on reflecting, how much time you are spending on seeking feedback. As I said, our behaviors, habits are mostly unconscious. We don't realize. So, how much your team trusts you to give the right feedback on the behaviors that you are exhibiting, and how much you are open to act on that feedback is something that can speed up your unlearning.
Okay. Creating the trust within the team and credibility of the team takes time. While most agile projects are 3 to 6 months duration, how to deal with it?
Building doesn't take much time. So I am guaranteeing many times you might talk to a person or even not talk to a person, just see that person and trust that person, right? So trust can be developed even in a minute or in a second. Many times we trust people just by the look, how they come across. Sometimes you trust somebody by the first interaction. It's again depends on what you are looking for. If you are clearly trying to establish trust, you know the trust equation. You can look for trust equation. It is called credibility, reliability, intimacy upon self orientation. That means if you can build credibility with your team, it contributes to building trust. If you build reliability with your team, that means team can rely on you to deliver whatever you have promised to deliver or you have taken accountability for. That also contributes to building trust. Intimacy, the amount of relationship, the effort you put in building that relationship to build that intimacy with people, that also contributes to building trust. And the biggest thing that can impact trust building adversely is self orientation. If you keep talking about I want this, I want to grow, rather than talking about team orientation, you will always impact the trust within the team. So the three major things which can possibly influence trust building is building credibility, reliability, and intimacy with the people or people in your team, in and around you, and take away the self orientation, take away focus or onus on yourself. Then you will see that building trust is not a big phenomenon that we talk about. And building trust is not one sided affair, it's like mutual. It's trust has to be an exchange between two people. Only one sided effort will not help you build that trust. So that is something you have to focus consciously. So I don't agree with the point that in a 3 month or a 6 month project you cannot build trust. You can build trust even in a sprint. It is possible. It's about, are you doing the right things? Are you exhibiting the right behaviors for the person in front of you to build that trust? That is the most important. Long answer, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. This is the last one we'll take. Our product manager always a business representative?
It depends. It's not always, because there could be a completely technical product being built, right? So, which has no direct business value. It could be a component which could contribute to other product which directly delivers business value. That means there is possibility that there could be product managers who are more technical, but mostly it is business, but it is not 100% business. There are product managers who are technical as well.
Thanks. I think a lot of questions. It shows the interest in the subject as well as interest in your topic itself. And I think you have touched upon all the aspects so well. There are a lot of questions which have come. But I think we would stop at this point, and I would request Mr. Rafael, who is VP Marketing with PMI Mumbai chapter to give a vote of thanks.
Sure. Hello. Hi, good morning,
Yes.
friends.
Hi, good morning, Rafael.
Hi, thank you. So this is your Vice President Marketing for the term ending March 31st, 2021. I'm Rafael David. I've been associated with Project Management Institute for the last 20 years and with PMI Mumbai chapter since 2003. It's an honor and a privilege to give a note of thanks to Mr. Nivarti Jairam. I was totally impressed and engrossed in this last nearly 2 hours of your presentation. First of all, I like your tagline, stop yourself from stopping yourself. A beautiful tagline. And so, thank you again, Mr. Nivarti, for lucidly explaining the intricate differences between the traditional project management and the agile project management. Since lockdown, we have been having a lot of sessions on the PM forum explaining to us about agile. But today's session was truly different. You tried to lucidly explain to us the intricate details in the last few hours. I'm sure there's a vast topic, and you shared with us the pearls of wisdom that you had amassed during the last 30 years of your experience. I was looking up Google and really impressed with your illustrated career. Though time was short for covering such a vast subject, you did justice in touching upon focus areas to distinguish between traditional and agile project management while illustrating with beautiful examples. I have noted them and I have also taken screenshots. I'm sure since this presentation is recorded, we'll be sharing it with all of our students. And truly, people were really engrossed and the kind of questions that was posed to you, truly impressive. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity to give the. Thank you. Over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you, Rafael. Now I will call upon our president, Mr. Bharat Bhai, to present the certificate. But before that, if I can be made presenter, I will show the certificate which we will be presenting to you, and then Bharat Bhai can say a few words about it. Jairam, can you pass on that, make me presenter, please?
Okay, should I make you presenter? Just a moment.
Yes.
I'm not that good with.
Yeah, it's done.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry.
Thanks.
Namaskar.
I hope you are able to see my.
Yeah.
Yes, you can see.
Yes. Over to you, Bharat Bhai.
Thank you, Mr. Ketan, and thank you the whole panelist team, and thank you to Rafael sir, Rafael bhai. Thank you, Mr. Navrati. This is an excellent bridge building between the old traditional project management concept and the people and who want to switch over to the new agile methodology, and then the subject that you have touched upon will build really a confidence among the old traditional people who have worked for at least last 20 years in project management using traditional methodology, not just SDLC or waterfall, but I would say some people must have worked in iterative methodology as well. So those people who reach this gap from waterfall to iterative to agile, and then they will see a new roles that you have given, 6 roles that I really appreciate and love to read it again and again. And I'm really thankful to all this, your experience driven subject matter exposure to us with your live practical experience that you have given here also. I'm really thankful to you. Please accept on behalf of the PMI Mumbai chapter a certification of your appreciation on behalf of all board members and all the members and all the attendants over here. please accept it. And I request Mr. Ketan to post them in a due course of time and within a brief results. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank Priya because she was the one who initiated the conversation. And it's always great to share whatever we have experienced with the group and with the community. So it's a great privilege to be part of this group. And thank you, Ketan and Priya, for making it happen.